Okay, so now we're going to get into some real CADing. CADing is where we create the design of the robot on the computer before we actually build it. You might ask, why do we do CAD? When you become proficient with CADing, it's a lot easier to modify the robot in CAD instead of real life. Okay, when you go through designing a robot, you make mistakes. You have to rethink where to put things, how things are going to be structured. Say you put a screw in the wrong place. In CADing, we can move that screw with a few clicks of the mouse. But in real life, you have to unscrew that screw and then re-screw it in back in the correct place. This will take more time, and maybe you need 2 people to actually complete this task, right? CADing can be done solo. CADing can also be done at any time while we have limited hours in the lab. You design the entire robot and plan out where every single part's going to go, and then you just simply execute this while we are in the lab. You can optimize the time spent in the lab. Yeah. Finally, while this isn't true given the nature of VEX parts, when you're making more advanced robots like an FRC, you have to CAD the robot before it's built because the robots are too complicated to just freehand the robot in real life. Okay. After all that set up in the previous videos, hopefully you've also gotten familiar with manipulating the camera. We are finally going to get going. As I go through the next 3 videos, please follow along, copy the steps to create the exact same thing in your files. Okay. So earlier on, it said join the VEX project. So now open the VEX project if you haven't. Okay, and let's go to 2022 to 2023 folder. Let's go to summer training. Okay, and we are going to create a file here. How do you create a file? Okay, I am holding down Command and clicking S. If you're on Windows, it would be Control S. Okay, to save this file. And let's just put your name. Okay, and put a dash and then write try space. Okay, like that. And then the file is created here. So keep in mind whenever you create a file, whatever you have open on your left bar, that is where the file is going to be created. It's not a disaster if you create the file in the wrong place. You have to right click on it and then click move, and then you can move it to somewhere else in the Fusion 360 space. But please do not just like leave your file somewhere randomly in the library. That's like distracting, and you should keep your files separate from the library. Okay, let's not mix things across. Okay, if I did that a bit too quickly, if you go back to the VEX project, okay, like the home page, I guess you might call it. Okay, we're going to be using the version 3 library located all the way at the bottom. That's what's compatible with the plugin you installed earlier. Okay, so you double click on a folder to open it. Now we have the folder here. Okay, you always almost want to have the setup. You have your file open. Okay, we'll say it over here, and you have all of your different parts that we're going to import to create this robot on the left. For this introductory course, we're not going to create an entire robot. We're just going to make a dry face. Okay, but yeah. All right. So first step is we're going to flip to solid. If you're right now in the VEX CAD library, make sure you're in solid. Okay, we're going to go to the create menu. We're going to go to new component. On the next video, I'll talk a bit more about components, but for now, just think of them as a way to structure your files, structure different pieces within your file. Okay, so we're going to create this new component, okay, and I am calling it structure. And make sure all of these other settings on your Fusion 360 line up with mine. Okay. So I'll talk about activating a bit here. Depending when you import something, okay, you may want it to import into a specific component. In fact, usually you do. Okay, and you want to make sure that component is activated. If I activate this dry face, right, and say I import structure, substructure here. So I'll take this 2x C channel aluminum piece. Okay, different ways you can import, either you can drag and drop the image, you can right click and click insert into current design. Okay. Right, actually don't follow along for this if you want to. I'm just using it for an example. Lord, my computer is a bit slow today. Okay, so we have the piece imported, right? Because it is, that's all good. Make sure your plugin is running, otherwise that second menu wouldn't appear. By plugin, if you don't know what I mean, just to clarify, it's this thing we did earlier. Okay, make sure this is running. Yeah, okay. So because I activated the primary component, which is just basically the name of the file, right, it will import this piece under that, okay? But let's say I do Command Z, okay, and I activate structure, and this is what I actually want you to do. Start following along from this point, okay? Let's import this 2xc channel aluminum, okay? And you'll see that the aluminum is now within this structure component, okay? It's nested within it, okay? And that just helps us organize our file. When you're creating the drive base, you're gonna have many, many different pieces, and you usually wanna separate the different types of pieces so that it's just easier to keep track of things in your file. Okay, when you import your piece, this is very important. Okay, this move menu appears, and it has something to do with the timeline and making sure that your file takes up as little space as possible. But what you want to do is move your piece to exactly where you want it before you click OK. All right, and well, you'll see different ways to move pieces, but for now I'll cover the basic setup with the free move option. Okay, we can use these arrows, okay, and it'll move the piece in increments. We can use these scroll wheels to rotate the piece, like so, all right? And you can do this on all three axes in the file. And yeah, I'm rotating the camera right now so you can get different angles of it. Okay, there are some other options here. There's the square and there's the dot, and this allows you to kind of just free move, okay? But usually this doesn't let you accurately move anything. It doesn't really do much for us. So I'm going to request that you just never use the dot or the square. Always use the arrows. Okay, and I'm going to reset these all back to 0. I'm clicking tab to switch the values. Okay, yeah, so you don't want to use the dot or the square. It just doesn't go well for us. Okay, so there we go. Something else we're going to keep in mind is the cube in the top right corner. This lets us keep in mind which side is the front, back, left, and right in the file. Okay, and we want our drive base pointing front. So I am going to use this scroll wheel and rotate this C channel in that direction. Okay. You want to make sure your piece is in the same orientation as mine relative to the cube. Okay, so you want it going like going across from right to left, so that when we look at it from the front side, it looks like it's going straight across. All right, okay, and notice, right, I did a whole bunch of different things. I can still continue to move the piece. I can drag this piece with arrows. I can keep rotating, right, and I don't have to click OK or Enter, right? I just drag the piece. All right, I like where it is. I do not click Enter. Okay, let's say I want to keep moving it. Drag the piece some more. Okay, I don't click Enter. So I'm just stressing this. So I'm gonna put it back where it was. Okay, I like where when you like the final position of the piece, then you click OK. Now we have the piece here. Now it pulls up the modify menu. It automatically like applies this modify tool to every piece you import. Okay, and in this case, we do want this C channel to be 35 holes long. But say you did want it to be shorter, you would change the value in this case. All right. And so we're going to click OK. All right, so that was an introduction to the move tool and getting orientated with the cube. Okay, I'm going to now import another structure and make sure another structure piece, make sure your structure component is still activated. Okay, that didn't work. Insert inside. There we go. All right, and now I'm going to teach my second move type setting. Okay, so right now we are on the free move setting. Okay, and now I'm going to ask you, after rotating the piece in this orientation, okay, so it's looking like this. This is how your file should look right now. We're going to switch from free move, and now I'm clicking down on point to point in this move menu. Okay, so now I'm in this setting. And basically how this works is we click on one point, usually on the actual piece that we've selected. So the selection is this piece. It doesn't highlight it blue anymore, but we know this particular C channel is selected. Okay, so you click down on one point on it, and I'm clicking on this point. Okay, and it goes over to this point. Okay, and then it moves it like that. And now we are all lined up. Okay, some mistake people might make is, let's say, you know you're going for this hole in particular, and if ever anyone needs reference, okay, it's the 15th hole from the left. Okay, let's say you're going for this hole. You know this is the correct hole, but you accidentally click the wrong dot. You click the dot on the inside of the C channel that's above here. Okay, and then you do, though, click on the correct dot on C channel here. Right, now you're going to see your piece is actually inside. And this is a big no-no in CADing. You can't, like, Fusion 360 doesn't have some kind of physics engine. It's not going to understand that the piece inside of another piece. You have to check and make sure you don't make this mistake as a CADer. Okay, but if you do things incorrectly while you're CADing, right, this is going to lead to inconsistencies in when you actually try to execute your design and you actually try to build it. So you want your CAD to be as close to the real thing as possible. Okay, so let's say you click that wrong point, right? You don't freak out, okay? Don't freak out and click enter and like try to pull up the move menu again. Like I said, when you import a piece, you want to put it exactly where you want it to go without exiting the move menu. Okay? So let's say we did that screw. We can switch to free move. Okay? It's a bit hard to click on the points because they're all on top of each other right now. So I'm going to drag up the piece a bit. Okay? I'm good with that. Now I'm not clicking enter. Okay, now I switch back to point. Okay, and then I click on the 15th hole on the bottom side, and I click on the top there. Okay, and now the piece is all lined up. And now that I am happy with the location of the piece, I click OK. All right, or you could have clicked enter. And this piece we also want to be 35 holes long. Okay. So, right. Now I'm going to continue on, and I'm going to very specifically copy and paste certain pieces, and I'll explain this in a sec. But for this one, we want to copy, paste. Okay, I'm just doing Command C, Command V. It's like copy pasting in a Google document. Right, and I'm moving this piece over by, well, in this case it's negative 3.5. On yours it might be positive 3.5 inches. Okay, if it's in millimeters actually, sorry, then you should type in manually 3.50 IN, and that'll give you inches. Something else you might have to fix is you go to document settings, okay, you click this change active units button, and you switch unit type, the default is millimeters, to inches, okay, and you check mark set as default so that this will be consistent on all your files, and then you click OK, and then you'll be good for those settings. And then whenever you use the move tool, by default your unit measurement will be in inches. Okay, so copy paste that one. Now I'm copy pasting this C channel, okay, specifically this C channel. All right, and now I'm going to drag it up a bit so it's a bit easier. Rotate it 180 degrees. Okay, something else to pay attention to is sometimes it's 175 degrees, right? And that's not perfect. Your C channel will be tilted slightly, so you want to make sure it's 180 degrees when you do this kind of rotation, right? And then I'm going to switch back to point, and go with this hole. Okay, and line it up to this hole here. Okay, we can zoom out a bit, make sure all the C channels are lined up. They do look lined up. All right, and I'm going to click enter, and now we have part of the setup done. Okay, now I'm going to teach one more move type. See if it'll let me. Okay. Or, well, okay, one other trick you can do with the move tool. So let's say you do make a mistake, right? Not, you should try to avoid this, but you've put the piece in the wrong place, okay? After you already exit the move menu, then you can click M to pull up the move menu. And you should always do this after selecting a piece. I just now selected a piece by double clicking on it, like this. Okay, and I click M, and it pulls up this move menu, right? So, okay, why is it a problem to do this? I mean, it's not a serious problem, but it will build up over time if you do this many times, and it will slow down your file. So you try to avoid it. But let's say I move it over half an inch because I realized I wanted the pieces to actually be here, right? Now I click OK. Now you will see in the solid menu that this new button appears, capture position, right? And I can click capture position. And if it's a weird thing, but now we look at this thing down here in the timeline, and we have this new symbol. And basically, the more symbols you have in the timeline, the larger your file will be, and that will slow down the amount of time it will increase the amount of time it takes to open the file, and will slow down your computer while you're using the file. So you want to make your timeline as short as possible, and that's the shorter your timeline, the more efficient you're CADing. Okay, and a very easy way to decrease the length of the timeline is to decrease the number of capture positions you have in your file. Okay, but in this case, I do know that we had the piece in the correct place, so no need to create a capture position there. Okay, so pieces are in the correct place. Well, anyways, back to it. There's another trick you can do with the move menu. Okay, clicking M to pull up the move menu again. There is this thing here that is create copy, right? And it's just another way of basically doing copy paste, right? I can move the piece to where I want it to be. Let's check that's good. That is good. All right. Okay, and by check marking create copy, I'm actually creating more pieces. I made a mistake there. Okay, don't do that, right? If you saw just now, the pieces were being created under the main file. You want to be creating the pieces inside the structure file. So, okay, sorry, my bad. Anyways, back to it. We're going to pull up the move menu, check mark, create copy, drag it over here. It's 15 inches. Yeah. Okay, and you can see the original pieces are still here. This is an actual new copy of those pieces. And click OK. All right, and that's another way to use the move tool. So now you might be wondering, okay, you know, we're very early on, you did this weird thing where you decided to import a second C channel, but we're all using length 35s here, right? They're all actually the same length. They look like the same piece, and you would be right about that, okay? But let's say you had to modify your file in the future. Okay, and you realized you wanted to make your drive base maybe shorter. You didn't want to make it as long, right? If you copy and paste a piece, it's going to, anything you do to one of those pieces, it's going to be done to that, all of its like sister pieces, okay? This one here is a copy of this one, and how we know that is we can see v1:1, okay, and v1:2. Okay, so they're the same piece. Okay, I'm not using the correct term. It's actually a component. Well, okay, it's a piece and a component, same thing. Okay, and we can see this is a different piece because it has a different name, and :1 signifies it's the first piece. Okay, 2 is the second piece, 3 is the third piece, 4 is the fourth piece. Okay, so anything I do to one of these components will be done to all the components. So let's say I click on the Modify tool, okay, and I modify the first one, okay, and realize we want to make this 5 holes shorter. Okay, it's not showing it. Well, so I'll follow through with this, and I click OK, right, and look at that. Okay, all 4 of these pieces, because they're all copies of each other, okay, and they're all linked in this way, they all got shorter. Okay, and they all got shorter in the front because they have a certain orientation. Let's say well, first I'll undo that, make them all 35s. Okay, let's say I accidentally rotated this piece. Okay, another thing you can do with the move tool, I guess I'll tutorial this now, is you can set a pivot anywhere. So I'm going to set a pivot in the center of this piece, click the check mark. Okay, actually, I'm going to do this here. This dot in the middle on this side. Okay, click the check mark. All right, once you click the check mark, then your pivot is actually set there, and you stop adjusting pivot, and you actually move the piece relative to this new pivot. Okay, so let's say this new channel is flipped 180 degrees that way. Oops, did not think this through. Oh dear, come on, Avery. All right, so we now have it set up like this, right? Okay, on the face of it, it looks like everything is still exactly the same, but now I go and use a modify tool. I modify this piece. And again, we're going to cut off 5 holes from the front. Okay, oh no. We see because the piece was rotated the other direction, it's not pointing the same way as all of its other sister pieces, components. It gets cut because it's facing a different direction. Like it's still getting cut on the same side, just it's pointing 180 degrees the other direction. So it looks wrong. Okay, that's just something to keep in mind when you're modifying pieces. Now I'm going to Command Z all of that and put it back in the correct orientation. I'll check it's in the correct orientation, I suppose. Very quick. Yeah, it is. All right, so that's an overview, a bit of how components work, how they reference to each other like that. We'll build more of this in the next video. But for now, we have a basic drive base frame done. All right. At the end of every CAD session, you want to save your file like this. Okay. And then you want to take a screenshot, usually for the engineering notebook. Okay, and to take a good screenshot, usually you want to go to display settings, okay, which is this button down here. Go to object visibility. You want to click off sketches. Okay, sketch it, like all these pieces have a sketch applied to them so that we have a center point to click on for all of these holes. Okay, but you want to turn off the sketches when you take a screenshot because it makes things look a bit funny. Okay, and then now I can Command-Shift-4 since I'm on an Apple computer. Okay, and just screenshot all of this. Right, and that's usually how you conclude a CAD session. Make sure to always save your file and take a screenshot.